all very much for braving the 1,000th night of winter. It feels like. Yeah, who isn't over it? I'm over it. So it sounds like, I think that was really helpful. Thank you for doing that. It's nice to know who you're speaking to, especially when the group is really small. And I think it'll be more helpful for me to kind of speak to Beautycounter specifically for the people who are affiliated with Beautycounter, but also speak to others who obviously want the more general information, but learn a little bit about our company too, because we're really doing things differently. So Beautycounter is a 2-year-old startup company. We're based in Santa Monica, California, and we are a mission-driven company that is dedicated to getting safer products into everyone's hands. And for us, getting safer products into people's hands isn't just the products that we're making now at Beautycounter. It's also about education. It's about moving the market away from toxic chemicals in the first place. And it's about policy reform. So I kind of think of it as like this 3-legged stool, and the top platform is really the products that we're making now that are much safer. But the social mission, we're not delusional. We don't think everyone in the world is going to get their hands on Beautycounter. People won't have the access. It's just not how it's going to roll. But we know that if we can be a business voice for change and really advocate for solutions, that we can actually deliver on our social mission by raising the floor and making sure that people have access to safer products no matter where they shop for products. And when we talk about cosmetics, or when I talk about cosmetics for the rest of the talk, we're talking about not just the products that people traditionally think of, like makeup or hair products. We're talking about toothpaste, aftershave, body lotion, shampoo, conditioner, the products that you put on kids. So on average in the US, women are using about 12 to 15 products a day, which sounds like a lot, but if you kind of stop and tick through your daily routine, it can add up really fast, especially if you wear makeup, if you use hair dye, if you do your nails. Some of those are more occasional uses, but they add up pretty quickly. And on average, men are using about 6 products a day. So even those of us that are pretty low maintenance end up using, lip balm, shampoo, body lotion, and it starts to add up. Kids are using about 6 a day, and and teenagers are using a lot of products, which doesn't surprise anyone, but teenage girls are using an average of 18 plus products. And so that means that for a lot of these kids, before they even get on the school bus in the morning, they're exposing themselves to hundreds of chemicals in these products. And not all chemicals are bad. Everything is a chemical. Water is a chemical. We are made up of chemicals. But many of the chemicals that are used in the cosmetic industry are actually toxic and harmful to health. And many of them are also untested. They've never been assessed for safety. So I'm going to spend most of the time talking about environment, health, and safety, what it means to Beautycounter, what it means to me. Before Beautycounter, I was the co-director of the Campaign for Safe Cosmetics, and I've spent my career working to get toxic chemicals out of consumer products. So beyond cosmetics, water bottles, baby bottles, sippy cups, I spearheaded the movement to get bisphenol A out of products that we use on a daily basis. And with a lot of other allies, succeeded in getting companies to move away from BPA, although there's some regrettable substitution issues, which we'll talk about later. So my career and my passion is really to move the marketplace and move policy away from toxic and untested chemicals. And so when we talk about the environment at Beautycounter, we're talking about not just the traditional environment, glaciers and rivers and streams. We're talking about everything that is around us. We're talking about this room. We're talking about workplace exposures, regardless of where you work. If you work at Sephora, if you work in a cubicle, if you work on an oil rig, there's different levels of exposure to different chemicals. So the environment isn't just a place you go on vacation. It's everywhere around you. It's your car, especially if you spend a lot of time commuting. And in fact, the environment's even the human body. When someone is pregnant, they're the first environment for their offspring. And when we talk about environmental exposures, we're talking about chemical exposures through those various sources. So some of them may be harmful, they may be toxic, they may be toxic at high doses and not at low doses, they may be toxic at low doses. There's a lot of complicated factors here. Some of the chemicals we're exposed to are totally benign, some of them are beneficial. I am going to try really carefully to use the word toxic in front of chemical when I mean it, talk about harmful chemicals, chemicals of concern, because I don't want anyone to think that I'm trying to imply that the entire world is toxic and everything that's in cosmetics are toxic and we're all, should be running scared. It's of course more complicated than that. When we talk about health, we are talking about the state of well-being, right? Health is a really understood concept, but not always in relation to cosmetics. And when we talk about safety, people are usually familiar with the concept of safety when you think about being precautionary in ways like putting a helmet on when you ride your bicycle, or using gloves when you're cleaning your home, or during some sort of occupational exposure to chemicals. Another form of being precautionary and being safe would be putting on your seatbelt or having a first aid kit around. We think at Beautycounter, I'm the head of environment, health, and safety for us, and we're thinking about these terms all as very interconnected terms, and what we can be doing to prevent illness before it starts by reducing people's exposure to toxic chemicals in this one aspect of life. And that's because we know that there is cause for concern. There are strong links between low doses of environmental toxins, cancer, reproductive harm, and or other serious health impacts. And this isn't, you don't have to take it from me or from Beautycounter. There's a growing consensus that a lot of the illnesses that are on the rise, illnesses or disorders that are on the rise in the United States are in some number of them are triggered by exposure to toxic chemicals. And the School of Medicine at Mount Sinai, University of San Francisco, UC Berkeley is a leader in a lot of this work, and I saw when I was walking the hallways here that you guys are having Tyrone Hayes speak here tomorrow. And anyone who does live on campus or locally, I could not speak more highly of him. He's a professor of biology, a doctor at UC Berkeley, who does amazing work on the effects of atrazine, which is a common weed killer that's used on an unbelievable amount of our crops in the United States, but which is linked to changing the sex of frogs, and has been implicated in some really, really serious potential health impacts in human beings through our food chain. He's amazing. His research is amazing. He's an incredible speaker. So if you guys are around and interested in another event tomorrow, I couldn't suggest it more. So that's another route of exposure that we're really concerned with, of course, food and air and water. And that's another institution that's talking a lot about low dose exposure and why that's concerning. So we know that disease and illness is on the rise. 1 in 3 women and 1 in 2 men will develop cancer in their lifetimes in the United States. Asthma, ADHD, allergies, and autism are all on the rise. More couples are having difficulty conceiving or carrying a pregnancy to term. And girls are entering puberty earlier than a generation ago. And we don't even have to do like a raise your hand type of thing, but I'm positive that there's no one in this room who's been totally unaffected by every one of these illnesses or disorders. Like that no one in your family is suffering or going through, or any of your colleagues, your close personal friends. And of course, increased diagnosis is very important. A lot of people will say, well, is it that 1 in 3 women are being diagnosed with cancer because we have earlier diagnostics? No, the statistic is 1 in 3 women will develop cancer in their lifetime. So it's not just about diagnostics. Certainly the increased diagnostics and early screening is really, really important to preventing cancer death, and it does account for some of these numbers increasing. But when 40 years ago, 1 in 20 women were diagnosed with breast cancer, and today it's between 1 in 7 and 1 in 8 women are diagnosed with breast cancer. Genes don't change that fast, and increased diagnosis can't account for that uptick. That is a huge, huge number of women who are diagnosed with breast cancer, and of the women who are diagnosed, only about 10% of them carry a mutation on the BRCA gene. So it's not all about family history. About 90% of the women diagnosed with breast cancer in the United States are left scratching their head wondering, why? Why me? I breastfeed all my kids, I run, I eat well, why me? So I talked about how these toxic chemicals are in our environment that isn't necessarily our traditional environment, the way we think of the environment, but of course they're there too. And I mentioned, the atrazine, the weed killer in waterways and affecting amphibious creatures. We know that pharmaceutical chemicals, pesticides, herbicides, and even cosmetic chemicals are ending up in our waterways. Our water treatment facilities are not equipped to treat a lot of these chemicals, and they sneak by and enter our waterways and potentially even enter our drinking water systems depending on where we live and what kind of water you're drinking. So that's another route of some exposure that is really concerning. We know that some animals really far away, like polar bears in the Arctic, contain Teflon chemicals in their blood. We know that other animals in waterways, like in the Potomac River, are changing sex mid-life. And that's because of the effluent coming into rivers and the chemical discharge. So that's important not only because I'm sure that most of you in the room care very much intrinsically about the value and the respect for those creatures, but because those are indicator species. And what are happening to fish and frogs, can we do questions at the end?
Yeah, sure.
Thanks. What are happening to fish and frogs, we need to be paying attention to that because we need to potentially wonder if they might be doing the same thing to us. So taking a step back and looking at kind of the bigger picture, there are more than 85,000 chemicals registered for use, with thousands more hitting the market every year. This is a conservative number. And there are over 10,500 ingredients used in the cosmetic industry. The vast majority of these chemicals have not been assessed for safety by the government or industry. And when we talk about safety, what we're talking about mostly is long-term exposure. So there have been some acute exposure studies. Does it cause skin irritation? Does it cause eye irritation? But very, very, very little studies on long-term exposure, certainly not on cumulative exposure, the way that chemicals act together as in mixtures, because the chemistry doesn't stop happening, right, when they're in a bottle of shampoo or in another product that we encounter. Coming back to cosmetics, people might say, well, how did this happen? How did we get in this situation? Well, the law that's on the books that governs the $200 billion cosmetic industry is from 1938. So it's over 75 years old. It's 1.5 pages long, which is really, really small. I don't know if you've ever looked at bills before. It's super tiny, super short. And under this law, the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, which is the agency that is in charge of regulating cosmetics, can do virtually nothing. They can do almost nothing to actually regulate the industry. So they can't, they don't have a definition for safety. They don't require that ingredient suppliers or cosmetic manufacturers substantiate the safety of their products. You don't have to do any pre-market testing of chemicals or products before they hit the market. The FDA, under this law, can't do mandatory recall of a product that's even known to be mislabeled or adulterated. For example, a couple years ago, I guess it's several years ago now, the Connecticut Attorney General found 12% formaldehyde in the Brazilian blowout that was advertised as formaldehyde-free. That's the keratin straightening treatment for hair. So 12% formaldehyde, which is a known human carcinogen in a product marketed as formaldehyde-free, and the FDA didn't have the power to do anything about it. They issued a public letter to Brazilian blowout asking that they voluntarily withdraw the product. So to say that the law is toothless is really not hyperbole. It really does nothing. The industry is virtually unregulated in the United States. And the law is also problematic, and so many chemical policies are in the United States, whether it's at the federal level or even the state level or at the company level, because the implication is that it's basically based on 15th century science and really old school toxicology that says that the dose makes the poison. That is that there is a dose response curve, that the more you give an animal or a cell, the more your risk of harm. So that at some point, if you find that a certain dose of a chemical will kill a lab rat, if you have that dose and then have it again, that dose must be safe. So you have it and you have it again. So low dose exposures are incredibly understudied in this country. In the world, really, but especially in the United States, because there isn't really an incentive to do so. But we know that this isn't the case for several chemicals. For some chemicals, it really is true that the dose makes the poison, that small, very small amounts of chemicals the body can process, metabolize, excrete, that they don't pose a threat to our health, but that at larger levels they do. For some chemicals, however, like hormone-disrupting chemicals, they're actually more potent in very small doses because they more adequately mimic the way that our body actually makes hormones. So for example here, I have the active ingredients over here to the left in parts per billion. So the active ingredient in the NuvaRing, which can prevent conception, is present at 0.035 parts per billion. In albuterol, which can stop an asthma attack, the active ingredient is present at 2.1 parts per billion. And in case you're wondering what a part per billion really looks like in real life, it's equivalent to a teaspoon of red food coloring in an Olympic-sized swimming pool. So that's problematic. I'm just going to spend a really quick second on endocrine disruptors, or hormone disruptors. If you guys have any questions later, we can come back to this. I find this really fascinating. I talked about why low doses of hormone disruptors can particularly matter. Bisphenol A is a hormone disruptor that a lot of people have heard of, BPA. It's used to build polycarbonate plastics or lined tin cans. It's also on thermal receipt paper. If you go to the gas station and you grab a receipt that's kind of slippery, that's coated with free BPA, which is easily absorbed and uptaken into your hands and into your bloodstream. So BPA is a hormone disrupting chemical that the American Chemistry Council and other industry representatives constantly argue is not harmful to human health or to animals because it works with such small doses. But actually, some of Harvard's colleagues over at Tufts have led the research worldwide to show that really small doses of BPA is exactly what is concerning. Because if you look at this image and you imagine that the green image is an actual estrogen molecule that is binding to the receptor of a cell. All this is happening inside of a cell. So it's fitting like lock and key. The green is actually estrogen. But BPA, which is an estrogen mimic, it's an estrogenic chemical, is the orange block. So it can look different from the outside. Like a key to your home could look different from the outside if you went and made a spare. But if the inside groove is still locking or unlocking the key, it's turning on or off certain signaling pathways in the body. And that's because that's how our body makes hormones. If you took this same cell and you dosed it with a ton of bisphenol A, our bodies are so brilliant that that cell receptor would actually shut off and would recognize that it's a false signal, which I think is exquisite and fascinating. So I want to spend the next couple of minutes talking about what Beautycounter is doing to deliver on our social mission, what we're doing differently than a lot of other companies in this space. And I want to spend a minute talking about the difference between source and safety and ethical production, because there's a lot of consumer confusion, and I'm sure you get a lot of questions about this in your line of work. So a lot of times I'll tell people, what I do. Oh, I'm the head of health and safety for this company, Beautycounter, and da 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 da. And people are like, that's so awesome because I try to only use natural products too, even though I never said the word natural in my little spiel about what I do. There is a huge overlap between natural ingredients and natural chemicals and safer chemicals that are used in the cosmetic industry. But those terms are not mutually exclusive, or they don't overlap entirely. If something is natural or synthetic or plant-based or organic, that refers to the source. So where it was grown, how it was harvested, if it was made in a laboratory. You can have perfectly safe synthetic ingredients, and you can have totally harmful natural ingredients. And a good example of that is lead, which sounds like perhaps an exaggeration, except lead is really common in cosmetics. It's a common contaminant in colorants, both natural, like mineral-based colorants, and synthetic colorants. But lead, since it's a contaminant, doesn't have to appear on ingredient labels of cosmetics. So this is a known neurotoxin, it's really nasty. There is no safe level of lead, but if someone comes back